Welcome, one and all, throughout time and space, for this new episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. And join us today for this episode. We will review the 2012 anime film Berserk Golden Age arc, Part 1. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time English language sensei. For this movie bookender episode that we have, we chose to bring along a special guest of ours that we've had on the podcast once before, and he has an extensive knowledge within this work or the franchise in which this movie is based on. And not only that, but this movie is the first of a trilogy, and he has graciously agreed to do all three movies with us. But today, for this episode, we will just be doing the first one. And so, Jay, if you would, please help me give another weeaboo welcome to Jarrod as he sits and talks with us about this first trilogy movie known as Egg of the King. How you doing, Jarrod?
I'm doing pretty well. Please hold the applause.
Can we give you like some finger snaps?
Yes, we could do the snaps. Love it.
Yes,
love it.
like Beatniks at a poetry slam. But yeah, no. Again, thanks for joining us and coming back on the podcast and doing this three-parter with us. I know you were actually the first one that helped me get into the Berserk franchise, or at least watch the movies. I want to say, yeah, you were the one that introduced me to watching the movies beforehand. So it would be very interesting to get your take as we're walking through this film franchise. Now, Jay, what has been your exposure to the Berserk franchise?
Pretty surface level. I haven't read the manga, so excuse me that this is actually my first real dive into Berserk, but I've always studied Berserk through the lens of like panel study. I think I've talked about this when the mangaka Morai, or Kentaro's his first name, Kentaro Morai, passed away last year. We had him in our news story and we talked about this a little bit more, but yeah, I've always studied Berserk panels versus reading Berserk, which is odd. But again, when you want to understand the medium of mangas, you go to the master, and Mora has always been considered the master, and like going to influence like a lot of anime that we know and love, and video games we know and love. So it's kind of like easy to say like, oh, I'm going to look at his work, but not actually dive into it, because again, I'm very keen to violence, gore, and brutality and properties. So I get a lot of secondhand cringe and emotional or empathetic response. And I definitely got it watching this movie. So my caution before was definitely warranted. But yeah, this is my first dive into Berserk, really.
Okay. So with that being in mind, Jarrod, do you have any words of wisdom for people who want to dip their toes into Berserk? Do you have any warnings, disclaimers?
I will say this, and I typically like to stay with this. And shout out to my senpai, Mr. Meeseeks. Existence is pain, and that really does explain this anime for the most part. For just the story of Gus and Berserk, generally speaking, it's one of those animes that it does have a lot of blood and gore. The story is very well fleshed out, but it is the story of struggle. So that is my disclaimer going in. And as you guys know, I love that.
You just like riding the struggle bus? Do you want to become like the struggle bus driver in your future? Or at least like manage the struggle bus company?
You can just call me Truck Coon.
Okay, Truck Coon. Oh my. Oh my goodness. So, before we really get into the anime, or at least the topic of discussion, there was before we do that, we can warm up a little bit more first. I know. I think the last that we spoke to you, didn't we? Uh, I don't want to say it was the anticipated anime for 2022. Am I correct in that or no?
I do remember that. Yeah.
Okay. So like have you been I guess like what has the anime that you've been following up with, or have you dropped a lot of your anime that you thought that you were going to watch in 2022?
I dropped some of them, but I did pick up some new ones. A
Mm-hmm.
couple prizes came out, so but for the most part, I have ended up watching at least 5 episodes of every anime that I promised to watch. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
some of them I had to drop off.
What were the ones that you had to drop off?
Well, I want to say there was an anime that now features Corpse Husband.
Tribe 9.
I was gonna watch Tribe 9, but I couldn't keep into it. I lost interest. And then they told me, I saw on the news that Corpse Husband was going to be in the English dub, and I wanted to hear him, but I could not get over the rest of the voices, so I just couldn't do it. And then I want to say you actually picked an anime where it was like on the moon or on Mars, where they're going under the crust and people are getting a disease, space herpes. I'm not completely sure. But there is a disease, and it's like I can't remember the name of the anime, but it's like the picture of it is like the shadowy figure of a person with like a jacket or something. There's like a rifle, and they're going under the glacier part of a certain planet to find the cause of a disease.
Was that's not the lost insanity the lost child, is it?
That might be it.
Because you said that like what were they in were they in Antarctica at all or no?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's Insanity the Lost Child. Jay, what about you? Were there any animes that you've been that you picked up or you had dropped off?
Just the Attack on Titan, I guess, final season part 2, because it's been something I've been watching on a weekly basis. I also picked up My Dress Up Darling, which is a Cloverworks, which is the studio that did the something to relate to Jarrod, but did Grand Order. It's like been doing a well job or a good enough job mimicking kind of the affordable aesthetic. But yeah, My Dress Up Darling is about two main characters where one is like the cosplayer and the other character is the cosplayer like design dress designer or clothes designer. Yeah, so it's really interesting, like romantic story around these two people like pursuing their passions together. And I was like, wow, this is really endearing for something that is so niche, because the cosplay community, even though it's like ginormous in Japan and ginormous in France and the United States, is still somewhat shunned in Japan because, the older generation still see their younger generation dressing up like weirdos from cartoons. Essentially, that's kind of the vibe to that rejection of it. But yeah, I was like surprised that this is the first anime that's really tackled the subject. So like there was earlier this season, Slow Loop, and it's a fishing anime. And like so weird niche animes coming out like recently, but yeah, Slow Loop and My Dress Up Darlings are the ones that I picked up recently that I wasn't expecting, that we didn't even talk about in our episode about anime that was releasing this season. So yeah.
And I would have to say, like, after you had talked about Dress Up Darling to me in our off air, I started a little bit too, and I would have to say, like, it is very endearing, as you said, where you sort of it's just sort of interesting because of the individual who I guess you would call him a seamstress, or like you said, the cosplay designer, the one who's actually doing the sewing and the fabrication of the costumes. How he got into um, seaming, or at least like sewing and needlework, and that was very interesting. And it was it is sort of reminiscent of how sometimes gender roles can be flipped, because when he grew up he was sort of shunned for that, and it was just like you said, just very endearing how essentially both of them were helping each other push past push each other to pursue their interests. And it's just kind of funny because when you had mentioned how sometimes the older generation looks at cosplayers as weirdos. My first convention that I went to, I saw this elderly man. He had to have been like in his 60s or something, and he was dressed up as a Sailor Scout, and that was a very very jarring image that Mind Bleach will not be able to get out of my head. And it just brings a funny question that I have for Jarrod, and then we can get back to the main topic because I know Jarrod, you're a cosplayer as well, and my question for you is, what is the most jarring cosplay that you've seen?
That is a very tough question. Define jarring for you, because jarring for me would be extremely different.
So like I guess like for me, as I said, the one that sort of stood out to me was seeing that elderly man like dressed up as a cute well, quote unquote cute girl in in a sailor outfit, right? It's like basically like this obese man who's in this little girl's uniform, and that was jarring to me. But like jarring to you could be, I guess, like what would be your definition? Would it be something cool, or I guess more or less something that like stood out to you that left an impression on you?
I would say the one that I know left an impression on me was, funny enough, a sailor outfit. Sailor Moon out. Well, so there was a Sailor Moon outfit, which it was a guy, really hairy legs. The skirt was extremely short, and the bulge was sticking out.
Oh man!
And like I was just like, why did you choose? And this was when my nose still worked, so I smelt all of the nerd stank upon him. The other jarring one would be, I saw 4 people dressed as Mad Max characters, but they had all killed the Sesame Street characters and were wearing their skins. And on their backpacks, they had like little fluid jugs of like color, the same color of the person, like Big Bird. That guy had like yellow fluid in his backpack thing, and it was like moving around and stuff. And I was like, "What's that?" He's like, "It's Big Bird's blood," but really, it was alcohol, and they were getting wasted at MegaCon in Orlando.
So they just had these bladders filled with alcohol, and they just sipped on it as they walked throughout the convention hall.
Yeah, like they could just, it was like think of it like a camel bag. They could just like spray it out, but it looked like a legit Mad Max. Like this could be a gas tank on his back, like with 2 little cylinders filled with this like bubbling fluid. And there was 4 people, and they had just killed everybody from Sesame Street. Like a guy in red, the guy killed Oscar, and he was a grouch.
Oscar? No.
Yeah.
If anything, I thought that he would have survived in Mad Max's world.
Nah, they killed him first, and that guy was the most wasted. But yeah, those like 5 costumes were the most jarring to me, probably.
Jay, before we finish our sidebar, do you have any interesting cosplay stories or no?
No, the only time I've ever cosplayed was, I think it was SwampCon in Florida. I forgot what city it was, but I went as Kaz Kaz from Neo Yokio. So it was my first time.
The Toblerone. I
Yeah,
remember that.
Yeah, the giant Toblerone, and did the styling for the wig. My mom helped me out with that. Found the clothes at Goodwill for like a nice purple pantsuit. Had to sew on the buttons, and the wig and the Toblerone, made the box myself. And yeah, it was a pretty good experience. That was my only real. Oh, I actually did before SwampCon for another year. I did Team Aqua Grunt as well, and I got the striped shirt and the logo on my bandana and pants, and did scrubs for the pants for that aqua blue to that as well. So yeah, just my own cosplay experience. Can't really remember any other but like group cosplays from like big franchises that work well together, but nothing too jarring. I think I've been to really safe cons with no extraordinarily weird weirdos.
I would say that's actually pretty good, but I'm sure that like one of these days you'll probably run into the weirdos that the older people shun a little bit. But aside from that tangent, we're going to get to the nuts and bolts of this episode. And I remember last time I tried to give the synopsis, Jay was not happy. So, Jarrod, if you would you mind giving us a quick synopsis of the movie?
All right. So it's kind of more difficult for me coming from like I know too much.
Oh, okay.
I would say go ahead and go for it, man.
Essentially, just don't be too mad at me, okay? I'll do my best to paint the scene. And pretty much in this movie, we follow this mercenary swordsman known as Guts in the Kingdom of Midland, and essentially in his travels, he runs into this mercenary band or mercenary troop known as the Band of the Hawk. And while he's there with them, his personality it seems like changes for the better, because before he runs into this group, he just has this survivalist mentality. And as he interacts with this Band of the Hawk, more importantly, the leader of the band, known as Griffith, his world starts to broaden, and he begins to live and not necessarily just survive, because up until this point, he was he was definitely hit with the Charlie Brown beat stick. And as his adventures with the Band of the Hawk continue, you begin to see a bigger picture of the world where some magics may be involved, and there are also hints of an unspoken prophecy that may or may not occur, along with politics and things of that nature. So this movie was done by Studio 4 Degrees Celsius. Its genre is action, adventure, fantasy, and supernatural. And the rating is rated R, and it is also available for viewing on Netflix. And before we get into this, or begin talking about it, there's a little game that I would like to play with you, Jarrod. If you would. Would you like to play a game? Essentially, we're going to be calling it a resume review, and you had told me once before that your favorite character is Guts. And so, essentially, what we're going to be doing is I will give off a resume for one voice actor, and Jay would give off the resume for another voice actor, and you have to choose between which of us has the resume for Guts's voice actor. And as we also said off camera, the penalty for this game is if you get it wrong, you can't have gushers for the rest of the podcast episode.
Okay, so, are we going with the... Okay, yeah, just go for it. Let's go for it.
Yeah. So what I like I said, what I'll do is I'll give you my resume first, and then Jay would give you his resume, and you have to choose between the two of us. Okay? So with my resume, I have participated in King of the Braves, Gao Gai Gar. I was in the Berserk 98 series. I was also in Gundam Seed. I voiced in Oh My Goddess. I, surprisingly, was in Law and Order in 2006 and 2007. I was also in The Slayers. I was in Kurokami. And I was also in Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn.
All right, so that was resume A, resume B for me. So my voice performance was in Berserk 98 series as well. I had a part in One Piece, then followed up with F-Zero, GP Legends, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, Fate Zero, Seven Deadly Sins, as well as a role in ReZero.
All right, and that's it?
Yep, the least notable ones.
All right, so you guys are going to laugh at how much I actually might know. I'm going to think that it's Santrell's, and his name is Mark something.
You are wrong. Well,
what?
You were actually right on the name. The actor's for Guts is Mark Dreyerson. However, that was Jay's resume. And
What?
my resume was for Kevin T. Collins, who was the voice for Griffith.
What? Because I knew when she said Gundam Unicorn, I was like, I know who this is. It's definitely Mark.
Yeah, because to mention of his other notable references, I was actually surprised that Sam didn't put JoJo's Bizarre Adventure because he voices George Joestar. And in the Fate Zero, since we've been talking to Jarrod, he voices Tosaka Komi. Is that his? I even messed this up in the episode we talked about Fate Zero, but it's Tosaka.
You're talking about Father Tosaka, right?
Yeah, Father Tosaka.
Yeah, Rin's dad. Yeah. So, thank you for playing the game, Jarrod. You can't have gushers for the rest of the episode.
Well, you know what? I'm not even mad. I ate all the gushers. It's fine.
Okay.
You can't lose if you already won, you know?
This man's a gambler. Yeah.
I see that. Well, thank you for playing that game with us. I figured that'd be a little fun. But no, that was actually pretty good. I didn't realize that you knew his name. Wait, what?
Listen, terrible with last names.
But have you listened to Dreyerson and any other of the works? I mean, we mentioned Fate Zero, but was there any other franchise that you went and saw because you knew that Mark was going to be in it?
So I didn't see it because I knew he was going to be in it, but I just happened to know that he was in it. Let me see. I think, if I remember correctly, you said he was in Gundam Unicorn.
He's actually in Gundam Seed Destiny, oddly enough.
Yeah.
So I really wasn't as much a fan of that one.
Right, exactly.
He was in I want to say Age of Chaos. It was another anime from the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
You said Oh My Goddess. I can't think of too many.
Mm-hmm.
But once you said Slayers, Mobile Suit Gundam Unicorn, because I'm a Unicorn fan.
Yeah.
Fate Zero, I think he was in Zetman as well.
Oh, for the English dub, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ald Noah Zero.
Oh yeah, he's in All Noah Zero, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that I like that one as well.
Yeah, very underappreciated, and that came out a few years. Wow, a few years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, apparently, I just looked him up. Apparently, he was in ReZero as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah.
And Hunter x Hunter.
I'm trying to think who he would be in Hunter x Hunter. Probably one of the bigger guys. I'm thinking the dude that controlled smoke.
Jing Freaks.
Yeah, he's Gon's dad. Yeah.
Oh, that dirtbag.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Dad of the year over there.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that, but you already know how I feel about Dad of the Year. But it did say that he did in the Berserk movie, from 2012. Actually, the first one that we're reviewing today, it said that he voiced Guts.
And I want to say him and the other person, the resume that I had, Kevin T. Collins, they both were Mark being Guts. He was in the Guts in the '98 series, and Kevin was Griffith in the '98 series as well. And it seems as though they kept the same actors for the movies. I don't know if they are in the I don't think it's considered a remake, but that anime that came out a few years ago, it was sometime after the movies too, and that's something that we can talk about as well. I again, just to go back to my main point, I don't know if they were reused for that series, but I know that they were in the '98 and they were also in the movies as well. So transitioning into the nuts and bolts of the podcast, we're going to go into a little bit of the pre-spoiler section so that we can get a general gist of the movie before we, start talking specific plot points and things of that nature. And I know, Jarrod, you had mentioned that what drew you to the Berserk franchise was sort of how it's a story about struggle, things of that nature. But I guess for the entirety of the series that you were exposed to, is the story told very well? Like, is it consistent with as long as it has, or as long as it was when the creator was still with us, or did it turn into a sense of obligation to keep up with the material? Because I know, like, for instance, with One Piece being as long running as it is, there were several points where, like, it felt like I was just catching up because of the amount of investment that I put into the work. And there have been lulls with my fun with the franchise, but I would end up coming back to it, end up liking it. Was it something similar for you? Because I believe that when when the creator was with us, it would take him. He had these extended periods of time when he wouldn't release anything, and so that's essentially my question. Is like, when you were following up with the Berserk franchise, was it because the story was still being done very well, or was it out of a sense of obligation?
Well, the story, I mean, they've only recently lost the creator, and they're already basically at the end and have, I want to say they finished it at this point. But I feel like at that point, it's almost like there's no way to appease all of the fans. But as they didn't do a Game of Thrones, so I feel like it turned out pretty okay. But no, it wasn't a sense of obligation because I wasn't around when it first started. I kind of actually jumped in at the 2012 when the 2012 movie came out, and I rewatched the anime, read the manga, just because I was interested. And since then, I will say the animation has gone downhill because it was, CGI instead of hand drawn, which it's always better hand drawn. But at that point, I stuck with it because of the story. Stuck with watching the anime because of the story. But other than that, no, I feel like it's just a pretty solid anime.
Okay, so, and I'm glad that you had touched on the animation, because that was something I was going to bring up to you. I know that when the 2016 anime came out, it had mixed reception with the CGI and the hand drawn, how it was flip flopping, and it wasn't really blended well together. Not not to the quality that we would see in Demon Slayer or anything else like that. It was very jarring, very janky sometimes. And you said that you went back and you saw the '98 anime series. So I guess, like, comparing the animation of the '98 series like to the movie, uh, you said that would you have to say that the quality went down even in just comparing those two, or are they pretty comparable to one another?
I'd say they're pretty comparable, but what I noticed is they skipped a lot of Guts' early life
Mm-hmm.
in the 2012 movie, and but while they skipped a lot of his early life, which I thought had an impact, they also uh, played out how his accidental killing, like he killed the wrong person. I feel like that had more of an impact in the 2012 movie than it did when they did in the 97, 98 series.
So, like you said, like it seemed like they weren't able to put so much into the film story wise, but they were still able to focus on hallmark moments. Um, and Jay, so I would sort of like your opinion on this as well. So this is your first time watching the movie, and I guess just like in a general sense, do you feel as though um, all of the points that was addressed, so like the backstory, the pacing of, do you feel as though that the pacing of the story and the structure that was presented in the movie, that it was well done, or do you think that they could have restructured it a little bit more? I mean, do you feel as though like you were lost, or do you feel as though the pacing was good in this movie?
This isn't a case similar
Mm-hmm.
to the Gundam Unicorn and the Gundam Unicorn Re 0096. I forgot the year of the
No,
the
I think it was '96, like you
okay,
said.
good, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the Gundam timelines, but anyways, yeah. So it's not the
Mhm.
case where it's similar to that because of the 1997 version. That was 25 episodes. That's 25 episodes times what, 22 minutes usually. And this is just three movies, basically covering the same arc, which is the Golden Age arc. And there just has to be things that you have to cut. And
Mhm.
how it seems to have been cut, at least from the movie, not being able to compare it to the original series, is they just hopscotch over things because that all that backstory that Jarrod just talked about is basically covered like in this weird dream sequence after Guts gets stabbed, and he's just like, and it's not even like well defined. You can't really see what's going on because assuming
Mhm.
there's like some sexual assault that goes in on there, and he kills a guy, but I don't know who that guy was, and it seemed like he was had a harsh upbringing by maybe his father. Not sure. It just seemed to be some dude. So again, there was like a lot of moments that just seemed rushed or just skipped over because again, we're not getting to any spoilers yet, but there is a part, there is a time skip in
Mhm.
like the first 20 minutes where you see like Guts pre and post joining the band of Hawks, and you're like, oh, he's it's 3 years later now, and I have no idea what kind of change Gus went through or character growth he went through that period. I'm assuming that that gets fleshed out in one or two or three episodes, even in the original series, and especially more fleshed out in the manga. But yeah, it definitely seems to be something noticeable for this first movie, and hopefully they slow it down a little bit in this second and third movies. But for sure, it was noticeable enough that I was like, oh, I'm going to write a note about this. That I need to know more about Guts, and it does have that appeal of promoting you to go see the other properties because you definitely feel the weight of, oh, Guts is more damaged than it's letting on to, but I don't know how
Mhm.
damaged he is.
No, and as you said, it's we only get like a snippets of his backstory with his dream, or his reminiscent of what happened to him when he was younger. And I only know about his backstory mainly because of my talks with Jarrod, and he basically gave me a bit of a lowdown with what happened to Guts. And so like when I had first saw that scene, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's like this is understandable. However, as you said, like if you go in there blind, you don't really have any ties. As you said, it's like, who's this Randall guy? Why is he yelling at Guts? Why do I care? Like, oh, he's dead now. I guess that's good. you know, like that sort of thing, and it gives you a little bit of an intrigue to go back and to learn more about it. But then, you know, at least like for me, I was more drawn into the Guts that I knew and how his personality had changed after interacting with the Band of the Hawk and things of that nature. So, um, I guess like I'm trying to think if there's any other um, general things or thoughts that we can give before we get into spoilers. Um, Jay, what I guess like was there anything else noteworthy about this film that caught your eye? Um, yeah, I'm sorry. You're
Yeah,
about to
it's
say.
just weird. Again, like Draw, you spoke a little bit to this, but I have seen enough stills. I've seen like snapshots of the original 1917 anime, and like it's a like jarring difference to see that this was animated by the same studio that did Thundercats that we just talked about with another guest in previous episodes, and they would eventually go on to go with the Animatrix as well with like Mutafuckus, which is like I say one of the best anime movies of the 2010s. But yeah, like the CGI use in this is so wonky. It's not janky. So like we use the word janky to talk about how stilted movement is, but wonky here is more of like there's like some rendering issues. Like a lot of the background characters are not really fully rendered in what you would expect from a studio like this, and then all that's like really used for like big movement scenes when there's a bunch of battles going on is like a notable dip in the quality, talking about the difference between the hand-drawn animation versus the CGI, which again 2012 we've talked enough about that CGI at the time wasn't too terrible. It's just how it's being incorporated, and this was just one of those effects that they could have put more budget towards to make it less distracting. Because like there's like I would say like four major battles where the CGI is really used, and it like just really takes you out of the movie, and it makes you kind of like disconnected from the story a little bit. So other than the wonky CGI, there's like some character things that we can talk about more in spoilers. But before we get to, I guess, spoilers, the only thing I want to mention is like the character design for Griffith is so otherworldly in this series, and I think that's part of the point to it is that he exists in a world of his own creation, I guess, or he exists outside the world. And I wrote this in my notes that his beauty in it feels very foreshadowing to like what's going to happen to him, because like again I don't know anything past this movie. It just seems like
Mm-hmm.
such an obvious setup to how Guts has been raised, and again going back to that flashback and the duality between these two characters, it's like, oh, Guts is going to be the one that's going to get redeemed, or he's going to get a better life. But knowing that Jarrod is Truck Coon, I guess that's not the direction it takes. But yeah, same thing with Griffin. It feels like he's going to be sullied or dirt, or I guess sullied is the right word. But I wrote in my notes like Lucifer was the most beautiful angel. I was like, wow, that kind of just works perfectly for Griffith, because like you go into seeing his design, like
Mm-hmm.
he has a very unique helmet, he has like flowing locks, he's just like he feels like he's generating light and he's illuminating everything outside of him. And I was like, wow, that is so interesting that that one character model is so higher quality than everyone else is also distracting. So like just talking about the things that are distracting before we get into the story. But yeah, for the
Mm-hmm.
CGI and also the incredible character design for Griffith's character is kind of like highlights for me.
No, that's good. I'm glad that you had mentioned Griffith's design. Like I'm just thinking like that would be a pretty funny gag. Whereas like in say like in an animated work or something, like I could see um somebody like Gumball or even Chowder would have done something similar. Where it's like you said, it's like they put so much money in one character that like everybody else is like neglected. So I can see that like being in an anime or something like that, where every time a character comes on screen, it's like the quality of everybody else like just immediately drops, and you would see them like still be like in stencils or being like black and white and stuff like that. Whereas that one character is just like beaming with like all the money within that scene, things of that nature. Um, but yeah, so with that, we can go into the spoiler territory now, because it's actually kind of funny. Well, I guess it's just very interesting that Griffith stood out to you so much, Jay, and it sort of segues into a question that I have for the both of you, and we can start with Jarrod. Why do you like what makes Griffith's character so captivating to the mercenaries? Because we see when Guts is introduced, right? He's all for himself. He has that survivalist mentality, and you would think that all the other mercenaries, especially when he runs into them, they would have had a similar mindset. Maybe not as stringent, but leaning that way. And the fact that Griffith was able to have them fight underneath the same banner, things of that nature. So, like, what do you think is like what makes his character that captivating?
Well, I will say I can compare them both to characters that exist that you guys probably will recognize. So I feel like Guts is like Baki. You know, he amazing fighter. He happens to like he seems to know everyone. Like nobody really tries him or anything like that, but they do respect him. And I feel like that's where he kind of falls in because he is very much a loner, who's just in it for like he is just in it for the love of the game. Um, Griffith is they paint him as a more confident Jon Snow, right?
Okay.
Like he unites people under the same banner. He has his own vision. He's almost like if you can mix Jon Snow and Gilgamesh from Fate and like put them into one character. He has the confidence of like a god, but he's just so relatable to all of these people because he shows that he actually is like a good strategist. He shows that he like is a fair leader, and he doesn't seem to lose. He is the King Arthur of this anime. So it's easy to follow somebody like King Arthur. It's like, oh, you're just almost a natural born leader to everyone around you. You're the shining light to everyone around you. You have your, lieutenants at your, round table, and people follow that kind of thing. So like Jay was right. He does kind of illuminate every scene that he's drawn in because it's almost like his silver hair, his very pale skin, his armor, it almost is all so bright in contrast to the like browns and pastel color around him in every scene. And it's easy to follow somebody that, you put that kind of target or flag on.
And Jay, do you agree with Gerard? Do you have any different? Do you have a different opinion in regards to Griffiths and his charisma?
Yeah, as a additional dimension to it, he's also a lady killer because it's very funny that when the Princess Charlotte, I believe, gets introduced, she's the princess of the Midland Kingdom, and she just immediately swoons for him, and you get it because there's a conversation they have, Griffith and the princess have at the very end of the movie, and he's talking about ambition, and it's something that as a introvert who's a teacher, I'm kind of keyed into with the skill of being manifesting charisma. It's just talking honestly and being open, but that's also very, I think, again, talking to, it feels like it's foreshadowing because there's again, you said this in the opening, Sam, about the somewhat of a prophecy being spoken about, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that. But at the end, it's like he's speaking to someone that he can influence, and I think that's the additional dimension. So it's not only charisma, but it's influence that he has over his men and the people that he talks to. He knows, and if you want to put it in like a detrimental term, he's a manipulator.
I am so glad that you had brought that up. Continue, and I'll follow up after you.
Okay, and it's something that you see very slightly, and something, again, if you're used to toxic relationships. But he gets into a fight with Guts, and he breaks his arm or dislocates his shoulder, and then as Guts is like reeling in pain from that, Griffith cups his hands around his face, and I'm like, that's what abusers do when they beat someone. That there's a really good book, or not a good book, but there's a book called Pimp, and Dave Chappelle speaks about this a little bit, about the idea of how to control prostitutes or sex workers. And I was so heated to that moment. It's like, that's what you do when you try to get someone under your wing. It's not uniting people under your banner. It's controlling them through kindness, I guess. Which, again, if you're an empathetic person, you know how to manipulate other people's emotions. So that leads into, there's so much to talk about with Griffith, but it's such a good character build-up for what it is for 77 minutes. It's like, that's all there is. But for the things that they do skip over, especially for Guts, they do have a strong foundation for who Griffith is.
Oh, definitely. And as you had mentioned earlier, when I'm going back and I'm rewatching it, and it was funny, I didn't catch it the first time, but as I'm watching it now, and how seeing Griffith interact with everybody, I'm just thinking, it's like, this guy's a cult leader. Because like just the way that everybody venerates him and everybody talks about him, especially in the Band of the Hawk, like when Guts is brought into the fold, everybody is pissed off at Guts because he dared to fight back against Griffith, even though the only reason why Guts was fighting those people to begin with is because they were trying to steal his money. And being the unit that he is, he basically just shows everybody up, and the only person who was able to really subdue him was Griffith. And like I said, it was just very interesting seeing everybody like have their loyalty, or have that loyalty for Griffith. And again, because like with him being like a manipulator, so, or at least showing those characteristics of a manipulator, and whenever he's interacting with Guts, it's very, very interesting. It sort of reminds me, at the time I was watching like an Instagram story where it was this guy, how he was sort of rescuing pets from abused homes. Like for instance, he would have to wear these padded gloves every time that he was trying to interact with these dogs at first, because they would always bite him because of the environment that they had just came from. And it was sort of like that transition where like at first he literally had to pin this dog to the ground so that the dog wouldn't try to fight him. And then by the end of the video, which I'm assuming is probably about 6 months, maybe to a year, we see the dog being very submissive and even acting somewhat happy that it's around the master, or at least the person that rehabilitated it. And it was just funny, like seeing that and watching Griffith and Guts in tandem, because a comparison that they make to Guts is that he was like a mad dog when he was first brought into the fold, and we saw like Griffith literally beat him into submission so that he can sort of like walk in line. And it was just sort of interesting seeing that. And the point that I'm trying to make is that because we do see Griffith and his manipulative tendencies, so whenever he is talking to Guts, he has that very charged speech where it's like, you are mine, and things of that nature, of making Guts feel wanted. And so my question to you two, and we can start out with Jay this time, was like, when Griffith was talking to Guts in this way, uh, was he being genuine, or do you think that he was being manipulative, especially with the speech that we get about him and ambitions near the end?
Especially when, or in that moment, I don't think it was, because one, there isn't really that title of Mad Dog that's really earned. Again, I think it's something that does feel a little bit skipped over, because in the interactions that we saw from Guts leading up to that point, he's invading a castle, he's a mercenary, and he only attacks, he only risks his life to take down like a final boss when he says, "Oh, pay me this much and I'll do it." And then his response to like the nobleman that was in charge of the invasion was like, "Oh, come under my wing," and he's like, "No one can cage me." So like that leads into it, but also then the band of hawks attacks him, tries to rob from him again, and then he also defends himself, and then there's really no mad doggedness to his character. So again, I think that's something that was skipped over. But when it comes to how they show Griffith's admiration for Guts, like on their first introduction, or when he sees Guts take on the final boss, is a very quiet moment, which I think again is a positive to the movie, is that they take these moments from the battles to just slow down and breathe, something that a lot of war movies do very well, to kind of sell the hyper violence of some scenes and then the quietness of others. Is that Griffith immediately sees the value in him, and they even have a speech on a hilltop saying that, is like, "Oh, I see into your soul and I know who you are," which again is another key to charismatic people, that they have the skill to read people and assess what they need to hear. So it's kind of hard, because if you talk about ambitious people, then they are ambitious, which is like one of those weird contradictions. But it's like, where do you draw the line between knowing what you want and being resolved versus manipulating people with the intentionality of using them? So it's really hard to draw that line with Griffith, because it does seem to run the line of a sincere brotherhood between him and Guts. Like, "Oh, I'm on my way to the top and I need you by my side. You're my right hand. You're the right hand of the king," essentially.
Yeah.
And I think towards the end of the movie, when he gives Guts the order to assassinate someone, that's reflective of that. So I don't think it was manipulation at the beginning. I think Guts is the only person that Griffith actually trusts or cares about.
Jarrod, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm kind of on the same page with Jay on this one. Guts, I guess in the way of trying to say Mad Dog, it's kind of like the bruiser in hockey. You have that one guy you can always depend on to get the job done. And that is Guts to Griffith. He's his most valuable chess piece. And I will agree that he did use and kind of manipulate a lot of the people in the party, because at the end of the first movie, I think Guts was starting to realize he's not exactly friends with Griffith. Like, they're not equals. And I think at the end of the first movie, he started to realize that, like, through his character development.
Okay, yeah, and I guess like that's I'm trying to remember how I'm trying to remember where exactly it is. I can't remember if it was like the end of this movie or was the beginning of the next one, because I know that Guts does leave the Band of the Hawk so that he can sort of.
Wow, spoilers for the next movie. Jesus, okay.
No, I couldn't remember.
Okay, well, yeah, let me tell you.
Yeah.
So, because the ending scene actually does piss me off something the most of this. But yeah, the movie ends with Griffith and his conversation with Princess Charlotte, and Guts going on to the realization, like Jarrod said, about we're not friends, that I am his tool, I'm his right hand, but he doesn't respect people, as Griffith says in that conversation. I see people as my equal when they're equally pursuing their dreams. And then that's the lead out of the episode. And the thing that I guess we can get into, if it's on your list, Sam, is that they frame Griffith, Guts, and Cassia. How do you pronounce her name? Cassia?
I think it's Casca.
Casca. Yeah, in the same, like Casca in the same frame together as like if they're equal parts of the same story. Yeah. And she's the worst written in the story for, I don't know, obvious
at
reasons.
At least up until this point, yeah.
Yeah, I guess. But again, like, the movie just leads you into, again, the next movie, which again, it's planned out into 3 movies, but it does definitely feel like one piece because it's not too much of a cliffhanger. It's not in the same vein as Lord of the Rings, but it does function somewhat like that. So you want to immediately watch the follow-up so that it blends together.
What really pissed you off about the ending then? You said because like the way that it ended, it makes you want to go and at least like finish watch the next movie to see like what comes out after Griffith's speech.
Well, it's a thing of, okay, so I didn't think it was possible that I would dislike a character as much as Sakura from Naruto. Yeah. But the way that, okay, I even forget how to say her name again. Casca is in love with Griffith is so, it's like, it's the worst part of the cults, the mentality that you talked about, Sam. It's complete devotion without any sense of ownership of it. It's like, I'm willing to throw my body in the way of any blade for this devotion, and it doesn't have any right now. It doesn't have any context. So again, it's something that does feel like it was probably skipped over. Like there was some kind of backstory to her character written in beforehand, but in the function of the movie, she's just a whiny side character that's mad that someone came in and replaced her technically, because I don't know if he becomes the commander, but I know he becomes a captain inside of the Band of Hawks. But at every moment, if Griffith's life is in danger or something, she's always using Guts as the excuse for why it's happening, even though they're a mercenary band. It's like a characterization of someone that isn't a mercenary. And even in their first introduction to her character, she's not competent in her fight against Guts. But then at the very end of the movie, again, which pisses me off, they frame all 3 of them together as if she's important. So I'm like, what is with her character?
Foreshadowing.
Exactly. My point. Yeah. So it feels like intentional foreshadowing to a character I read off so early on. So I'm like, okay, what's going on?
I guess as you had mentioned before, Jay, like there were some times in the movie where there was definitely like a time skip, and you definitely feel as though that there were parts in the story that could have been expanded upon. So, like for instance, we see that there's a 3-year time skip in which he does join the Band of the Hawks. And my question to you, Jarrod, was that in the manga or in the previous anime, is this time skip, is this a part of the story, or was that merely done by the movie to save time? Like in the original source, do we actually see Guts going about and adventuring with the Band of the Hawk before he ends up fighting Zod, or is that time skip, is that actually part of the story?
So the time skip, so they do a bit of time skip because, it's not like, so in the manga / the anime, if I remember correctly, it's more like a montage than a time skip.
Okay, so at least like in, as you said, in the anime, we get to see, or at least see some sort of progression of his time with the band. And I guess like that's also like a gripe or complaint that I had really was because like in the beginning we see Guts doesn't want any part of this band, and then we see him, he has like his own command and he has people underneath him, and he's very loyal to his own people, much to the degree that if he doesn't have to put them in a situation, he doesn't. Meaning, like if they go out into a fight and he can solo the entire team so that his own team won't get out there on the field, he would do that. And I don't know exactly. It would have been nice to see where that had came from, because it sort of comes out of nowhere. It's very jarring to see him do that 180-degree flip where um, he all of a sudden cares about people. And I guess that's sort of a testament to him interacting with Griffith and how much of his character has grown in that time to where he can start thinking about things like dreams and aspirations. Because like the beginning Guts versus the end Guts is completely different. Whereas the beginning Guts, he's like, oh, you can't eat dreams, right? He just has that stone pragmatism. Whereas in the end of the film, he is contemplating what it means to be a dream. Oh, what it means to dream, and like so that he can at least be considered equal to Griffith, you know. So it's just very interesting. Did you do you also have any thoughts on how Guts's development was portrayed in this movie, Jarrod?
I think that so overall,
Mm-hmm.
when as I said, when I first watched this movie, I had not been introduced to the franchise just yet.
Yeah.
So for me, it was enough to get me interested in the character. But I think that it could have been better. It could have been done a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because it doesn't get you as invested in his backstory because you don't really get as much of it besides like a brief flashback, and you miss his younger years. That may because he almost like comes off as you know like a Bleach character. It's like, oh, welcome, this is Kenpachi, you know.
Pretty much.
So I feel like it could have been done a little bit better to get you more invested, but it does happen over time.
Mm-hmm.
And as Jay said, it is very much like a lead into the next movie. It's almost like a previously on Dragon Ball Z type thing. But I think that personally, he is a very well fleshed out and defined character. Him and Griffith, actually. But those are the only two characters that are fleshed out to that extent.
As Jay had mentioned earlier, it seems like Casca, they're trying to promote Casca as important, but they really don't give her character the development that it needs for them to have that foreshadowing shot at the end. Um, and we've been talking about very particular scenes and very particular instances. And my question for both of you would be, what was a scene that stuck out to you the most in this film? We can start with Jay.
Oh, interesting. Stuck out in my mind. It was definitely the moment where I kind of sided with the idea that Griffin is, well, one, you have the scene with Nosferatu Zod, who is
Mhm.
a giant ogre looking guy first and has been decimating the band of hawks in like a castle siege. But then he transforms into a giant chimera kind of winged beast and gives a warning when he sees the, here's going to be the title drop, but the egg of the king, which is the name of a very peculiar artifact or necklace that Griffith wears. And it's the one thing that's dark on his body. And again, red flag also. But then he goes into the backstory, like after he gets wounded. I forgot. Oh, yeah, he gets wounded. And there's an exchange between him and Guts explaining what the necklace is, and then the necklace opens its eyes, and it's one of those weird moments of, oh, now I get it, kind of. It's like, now I'm invested in the story. Now I see where it's going. And it's odd that such a small moment happens inside this giant medieval war epic of a story, because there's not much mention of magic, because the abilities that Guts does feel a little bit supernatural. He swings around a great sword that, the great sword is somewhat of a fictional weapon that you can see in Demon Souls, Dark Souls, the Soul Calibur games. Any anime protagonist that wields a giant sword kind of gives its homage up to Guts. But that moment where the egg opens its eyes, I was just keyed into, because it's so understated, because Guts throws it up into the air, Griffith catches it, but then Guts is going to fall, and Griffith catches him as well. So I was like, oh, that's what the story is going to be about. It's going to be Griffith's struggle with whatever this egg is going to be. It's called the Egg of the King, so of course it's some part of the, again, prophecy. But then since a demon talked about it and knew what it was like, oh, okay, so it's a story about these two. Again, talking about why the ending scene of the three-way split between the three of them pissed me off. It's like, it's not her story, it's their story, and that moment just kind of solidified in my head, like, I'm in for the ride for Jarrod Buskun to run and destroy these people's lives as well.
It was very interesting that you had brought up Nosferatu Zod, because he was something that I was going to touch on a little bit later. But Jarrod, before we focus on Nosferatu a little bit, were there any scenes that stuck out or impacted or that stuck out to you when you watched this film now, or the first time that you did?
I would say when I first watched it, it was the I like to see the fight between Guts and Griffith, because I thought there was no way Guts could possibly lose to this girly man when I first watched it. And then when I rewatched it, recently, the scene that stuck out to me was the scene that Jay had mentioned where the eyes open. And I was like, oh, I know what's going to happen. And I was like, this is where the whole story starts, because it means so much going forward. And when he explained this whole thing to Guts, he's like, oh, yeah, you'll have to, trample over everybody and lose everybody around you if you want to get where you got to go. And he's like, we have two different ways of doing things and thinking. And it's just like, but to see that play out is like what I think the whole series is about. And so I think that was the scene that stuck out for me when I watched it again.
Okay. And it's interesting that like you both went, or at least gravitated towards, if not Nosferatu, or at least regarding the egg near the end. So that would also be that leads into a question that I had for the both of you: is what were your thoughts on how they introduced the world of magic in this world? Because watching that scene with Nosferatu, it felt akin to One Piece, in the sense that in One Piece, the world feels like there's stuff going on in the background that's going to impact the main story, no matter, regardless of what the main characters are doing, right? Like, there are actual active characters that are going out throughout the world, and Zod was one of those, where it's just this force of nature that's going around bodying everybody. And I would say that the egg, for me, was sort of reminiscent of Game of Thrones and how they treated magic, where it was sort of subtle at first, so that you can get used to the idea that magic is in this world, but it's not in the foreground to where it's not annoying, but like it's sort of just like prepares you to be introduced to magic later on. So I guess like that's sort of my question to the both of you is like, do you believe or like how was magic treated with that scene? Do you think that it was done very well, or do you think that it could have been done differently? Jarrod, we can start with you.
Uh, uh, I say that it's a real tough one, but I would say for what they had,
Mm-hmm.
from the source material to the anime, it was done as well as it could be for them. Um, Maybe animation could have been better, but it's hard to retell a story that's already been told and like try to like if you add too much, you end up like the end of Full Metal Alchemist, not Brotherhood.
Oh, the original one.
Yes, so I
Mm-hmm.
think they did what they could, and I'll
Okay.
leave it at that.
Jay, what about you? Do you think that they could have handled the magic a little bit differently, or do you think that it was just enough?
The weird part of dropping a supernatural element into this is that
Mm-hmm.
it's like unexpected and it doesn't feel earned, I guess, because yes, like from looking at Griffith's necklace, like early on, you see like there's something wrong with the world, but you don't actually know what it is, and there's no real setup to it either, as well. So
Yeah.
like you see Zod before there is an explanation of who Zod is, because like they said, like he's been living for over 200 years, and it's said so casually or matter of factly that you're like, when was this ever a thing? Because usually in fantasy stories, like because like at that moment it becomes a dark fantasy story. Up
Yeah.
until then, it was just a medieval, war story essentially, and it's just dropped and then never picked up again because there's no other mention of anything supernatural in the rest of the movie. And I guess I've seen the pictures or I've seen animation cells of the original Zod from the anime. That it's definitely not, maybe not more well done, but it's definitely more terrifying or more gruesome. It gets you into the more monstrous design of this character, and I think it serves it better in the original anime. But here it just feels like someone's day of animation idea. Oh, what about we throw a demon in here? Kind of scene. It's like, oh, we need a big bad here to eventually drop some hints about the egg and what it is or what it could possibly
Mhm.
be. And that's just like another detriment to it a little bit. But again, if it's like a epic to the story, then it feels similar to Lord of the Rings, where you get the one ring and you get invisibility for the first time, or you see invisibility for the first time. But then you get
Mhm.
before that, like the whole. I think in Fellowship of the Ring, you talk about Saruman and all his reigning evilness that goes on in the world. But yeah, it's just dropped into the middle of the story and then never picked up again.
I'm trying to think of like how to say this. So when we do learn of Griffith getting his egg, right? So like they we see it every now and then, but we don't really focus on it until we have that scene with Guts and its eyes opened up, things of that nature. I wanted to get your thoughts, Jay, on how Griffith acquired the egg. Like, what do you think about um how he got it? Because essentially he said that he was an orphan and he picked it up from like a peddler or something else like that. And hearing what we hear from Zod, like that dark foreshadowing thing, and the fact that Griffith just picked it up from a nobody, and like it wasn't, it was just sort of like out there in the world. Like, what are your thoughts on that? That and it could have been anybody else who picked up the egg and be in Griffith's shoes.
Well, what Zod says exactly is, oh, that's what they're up to. So you're already getting this foreshadowing of an evil organization or some kind of collective body of something or another doing evil things behind the scenes. And like always with medieval stories, again, if you look at anything Japanese, whenever they revisit something that is historic, they always put in like supernatural elements. So it's like not too far fetched to say, oh, there's like some kind of supernatural creatures behind this. And even when you see the flashback that Griffith gives us, is he goes up to the peddler in like an alleyway and they look decrepit like an old mummy, and how he says in the exchange that you can have this or you can get what you want most out of this world in exchange for blood and body, or bone and body, however they phrase that. So it's like there is some kind of lingering conspiracy, I guess that's the right word, going on, that they chose Griffith, whoever this they are, chose Griffith to be whoever Griffith wants to be. Because he says, I think in the first meeting with Guts or after the first battle, is I want to be a king. We don't know, or I want to create a kingdom. And we have no idea what the shape of the world is, really. There's no map shown, so we don't actually know where this is, what's the dimensions of the world that they're in, basically. So, like, is this Europe? Okay, so a kingdom in Europe, fine. Is this Japan? Is it China? Where is it? So why does he need to create a kingdom instead of ruling? So you kind of get that feel of why he's so interested in the princess at the end, is, again, an art of manipulation of, oh, if I marry the princess, then I'm going to be king someday. So it's like, yeah, that would be the safer way than just through bloodshed. But it is, especially with that prophecy or, warning that Zod gives to Guts, is like, if you let this man's ambitions fail. I wasn't really sure about what it was actually trying to say, but it was that, like, if you let this man's ambitions fail, you're in for an inescapable death, essentially. So I like that build. I like that prophecy element, but it also leads into, like, oh, there's some kind of big bad working behind the scenes, which is always nice.
Yes, it would be it's going to be very interesting seeing how the story progresses, and we get to learn a little bit more about the machinations behind the egg moving forward. And because we've talked about this throughout the podcast so far, that Griffith wants to lead, that he wants to become king. And the last time that all three of us sat and talked about kings, there were sort of three schools of thought. If you guys can help me remember from our Fate Zero special, where you have a king that's sort of for the people, or at least like how Gilgamesh, Alexander, and Saber, how they both all three of them represented like a different way to be a king. And my question to the both of you would be, do you think that Griffith embodies any one of these three different schools of thoughts of kingship, or do you think that he truly deserves to be a king? Jarrod, we can start with you.
When I look at it, I'm just like, it's almost like hard to wrap up because I don't want to spoil going forward. So I'll just say actually, let Jay go first.
At least like what we've seen Griffith depicted so far.
Griffith thus far in the first movie, you're starting to see that he has a master plan, right? So let's say Griffith is that guy that's not going to fail. He will sacrifice whatever it is wholeheartedly for whatever dream he has. People, things, he'll manipulate people, he'll trample over their whatever they own, whatever they have, and he'll gather people if he needs to accomplish this. And he won't respect you unless you're doing the same thing, because otherwise he can't see you as an equal. So that kind of makes it to where you have this very strong-willed person that can't respect anyone that's not willing to double cross him, right? And then there's no one else in the story like that. Guts doesn't really care that much. Casca, she's just there for now, forever. And you're starting to see the dynamic between the person who needs and will use anyone, and the person who doesn't need anyone, the loner that just happens to be, people start to follow him as well. And you see the dynamic of these two different types of leaders, the leader of the people who just is just there, and the leader that people get behind, and he's almost like a voted politician,
Yeah.
it's a power grab at that point. And that honestly is one of the things that I love about this anime and about all anime generally. Like in Fate Zero, as we mentioned last time, when you had Kirei and Kiritsugu fighting, and it was just a battle of ideas. And you have all these historical figures fighting like for all these people, but the biggest and the best fight that everyone was invested in was two like regular men kind of deal. And that is like how the story is told. That's what I also like about Berserk as well, because these guys are like, you see these two different types of people who are willing to do two different things to reach whatever it is they want in life. And that's I think that's part of this good, like that's part of the best part of Berserk is the storytelling there. That's what kind of gets me invested in it, at least. I'm not sure if that really answered your question, because that was really roundabout. Little gushing.
I guess no, like it does a little bit, because like I said, like I was essentially trying to box Griffith in to one of those three other ideals or ideas of what it means to be a king. And you mentioned it earlier, how Griffith sort of has the swagger or the confidence that Gilgamesh has, where like he knows like who he is, and like to get what he wants, he's willing to sacrifice any and anything for it. And I guess like it's what Jay had mentioned earlier. What makes it hard for us with Griffith is because like even though he's willing to do that, it's like we don't know like where that line is for him, because we see his interaction with Guts. You both have Jarrod has mentioned how the bond with Guts at this time is sort of like a brotherly love. However, he's having Guts go and do an assassination, and his interaction with Guts shows that, or at least he's showing Guts that he truly cares for him. But then we see Griffith talking with the princess, and his speech about aspirations and ambition. He basically doesn't see Guts as his equal, but his actions speak differently. So I guess it's just like there's a little bit more nuance that goes on with Griffith than what I was trying to do with that question. But I guess Jay, would you say that you're sort of in the same school of thought, where it's not necessarily about how Griffith is becoming a leader, but it's more about the story and the duality between Griffith and Guts, and how they accomplish the same goals in different methods?
So if you put the three kings from Fate Zero into a spectrum, you have Iskandar as the moderate, and then you have Arthur and Gilgamesh as the extremes on the opposite ends, and then Griffith is somewhere between the Iskandar and Gilgamesh side. And at the very end, you see the news of the Duke or general that Guts kills gets publicly announced to the princess while she's talking to Griffith, and it's the first time in the whole movie that Griffith looks evil because he's underlit. It's shown from above, and it's like one of those moments of, oh, my machinations have laid undisturbed for decades kind of thing moment. And it's so odd that at the very end, like, they kind of push the scaling more towards the Gilgamesh side, so you kind of know what you're in for in the second movie. You're like, oh, now he's going to rise to power, essentially. So now he has a position with the princess. He has, I forgot what his title is, but maybe he's a duke or something. A count. Oh, he's a count. And then the second movie is going to talk more about his rise of power, potentially. But with the whole Guts comparison, Guts doesn't have a goal. He's living for Griffith, kind of in the same vein as Casca. But Casca. But he has, at the end of the first movie, that realization, like, oh no, I'm just a hoe, I'm a tool, I'm a shovel, I'm things. And even in like the very early like first interaction, we hear about how Griffith feels about her. He says it's a woman's job to warm up a man. I forgot how is specifically phrased.
Yeah.
But it's like he never saw her as his equal, and she doesn't think that she can be his equal. But Guts is now in a position to say, "Oh, I'm not his equal, and I want to be his equal. I want to be considered a friend by this person that has changed my life." Again, you didn't really see how that happened, but you get it in a very small, nuanced way when Guts starts shaking after hearing what Griffith says about what it means to be a true friend to him. That I need to see you as an equal, and it wasn't too harsh to pull into his face and see him crying or anything. But for such a stoic man and such a badass to have that moment of, oh, I've been shaken to my core, and basically given some kind of sense of hope for a potential life outside of just being a tool, is really heartwarming. Again, this is why I want to be compelled to watch the second movie. But I don't think it's just about Griffith's character, about where he fits into a category. I think he's going to be on a sliding scale.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Where, as you said, like earlier, like we see him, he's more in the middle of, on your scale that you had mentioned. He was more in the middle, in between Iskandar and then Gilgamesh. But then, as we see him do his machinations, he's more towards Gilgamesh, and he's sort of being flexible in the sense of moving where he needs to be so that he can meet his goal. And it's I feel like we've just mainly been talking about Guts and Griffith because I think like those characters were the ones that were given the best, if not only character development within this film. And we talked a little bit about like the ideals and how they were sort of pushing like the character growth for both of them. And I guess I just would like to take a moment to appreciate some of the other things in the film, such as like the fights. I wanted to get your opinion on what was the best fight that was done in this film. We can start out with Jay here.
It's really sad that the battles are the weakest element to the story. I think it just, again, complements why the story beats are so good. Like the appeal of this are the slow moments outside of everything, outside of the battles. But it is the battle where Guts is recovering from his first encounter with Griffith. Griffith's like, "Oh, I want you to fight you at your full strength," but Guts is, that again leads into the Mad Dog kind of identifier. But he's like, "No, I want to fight you now." And then there's a really cool moment of when Guts misses a swing and Griffith jumps up and lands on his sword, and then he bites down on Griffith's swords and gets him to the ground, disarming him. And it's really interesting that, again, the fighting between the two is more impactful. It's not very like choreographically interesting in any means, but it definitely shows that Guts has always used brute strength to solve problems, like biting a sword and then forcing your opponent down and then beating them, but then not finishing the job because he wants to admire that he punched the pretty boy in his face for the first time, but then immediately get his arm dislocated because Griffin knows judo or some kind of disarming martial arts. And it's just nice because he gives Guts the chance to surrender or to submit to him, but Guts again doesn't, and then he dislocates his arm. And that's such an interesting fight over every other fight because everything else is CGI, but this feels like the one fight that isn't. Feels like it's cell animation or a 2D drawing, so I think that wins overall.
Jarrod, are you in the same camp as Jay? Was that your favorite fight, or do you beg to differ?
So I liked that fight, and I liked the fight where they fought. I'm trying to remember the name of the demon guy.
Nosferatu?
Yes. So I like both of those fights, and for different reasons. The first one being Griffith, the fight with Griffith, because it shows the that there is conflict, and that this anime is going to have a lot of conflict between these two main characters. And you could tell that they're not always going to be on the same page or even on the same side when you see, even small fights like this. The second, when they fought I guess he turned into like a chimera of sorts. When they fought him, going forward, that means a lot to the story, like, because it's your first introduction to this type of creature. And they play a major role in the story of Berserk, just generally speaking. And so, being that that's the first introduction to that kind of creature with like immense strength and otherworldly power, I feel like that was good. Even though I wish it had been drawn.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the springboard of like introductions into the kind of fights, like the kind of creatures you're going to need to expect going forward.
I would say, like, and that's also a good point that you had brought up with the fight with Zod, because that was the first fight that we've seen where Griffith and Guts are fighting together as a team, and we get to see both of their fighting styles a little bit similar, where Guts is trying to stave him off with his brute strength, and Griffith is there, and he uses his strategy in order to help both of them survive. And I would say, like, as you had mentioned too, like thematically and foreshadowing moving forward, like it definitely does mean a lot of things for the story moving forward. And it's also very interesting too, because it made me think of a question for Jay, with us being in the story so early on, and not really having too much of the story yet revealed. What do you think the title of the franchise Berserk means for the story as a whole?
Oh, okay, interesting. So I already know that, again, like there's like some things that I can't avoid just being part of the anime community, because Griffith kind of ranks top. He kind of pulls in top villains with like Johannes from Monster, as well as not L, but Light from Death Note. So I know there's eventually going to be a downfall to his character. But Berserk, I actually don't know, because Guts is known as a black swordsman. But again, that's like, I don't know how far away that is from the Golden Age arc when he becomes the black swordsman. But the idea of going berserker is like a known phrase, and I haven't seen any berserk elements to his character yet. So I would say that at some point there's going to be just a mass outnumbering to him to enemy forces, that he gets the title Black Swordsman and just leaves everyone decimated. So for right now, nothing worthy to be called a berserk, because like, again, he's not mowing down too many people. I mean, he has a high kill count, but he's not invulnerable. I mean, Griffith points that out during his first match, is that you damage the axe of the dude he's fighting, and then if you hadn't done that beforehand, then that would have cleaned off your head. And he points to a character flaw in Guts about he wants to test his limitations by putting his life in danger in all these situations. And again, that's kind of a berserk thing to do, is that you don't know when your limits are going to give out, because you think about Berserker from the Fate Stay series, like that's a berserker in my mind. Yeah. But Berserker kind of goes with the whole barbarian aesthetic in D&D. But for right now, Berserk is just a in the future kind of title for me.
Oh, okay, that's very interesting. And I guess Jarrod, like I know, like knowing what you know, that it's probably hard to separate lore from it, but I guess, like, if you can remember, like, back to when you were first introduced, I guess, like, this I can phrase the question this way. So were you interested in what the title meant for the show, and like as you began to watch the lore, did you begin to have an appreciation for that title and what it meant to the show thematically?
So here's my thoughts on that. So I feel like it started out, the show is called Berserk. So you're looking for a um, raging character, and it starts out with the Mad Dog, I guess,
Yeah.
right? And it just escalates from there slowly but surely. So as a Black Swordsman, I thought when it first started, it was mostly because he always was wearing like basically dark colors, and he had this huge dark colored sword and whatnot, and he was always the guy that you saw like winning the battles for. He was like Goliath basically. But it just slowly, and I'll like stop at the end of this movie, he slowly but surely becomes more and more unhinged, but also like conscious of what's going on. But I will agree that it is something that you will see later on, and I think it starts probably, I'm not sure if it's the second movie or the third movie, where you'll see it like become just his character.
It's just sort of interesting because at least like with what I'm thinking right now, and like from what you both have said, like how like Berserk is like you just filled with rage, you just want to like Hulk out and like strike against anything, and I guess at least like with the background that I have in my head, like of Cuts' character, how he had like that survivalist mentality, and now that he's having this essentially existential crisis, he's sort of beginning to rage against his older self and trying to grow to become an actual person. And as we'll see him moving forward, that rage is not just going to be fixated on like his older self, but also to the world that's around him. And because even though it was very slight, it was present in this film where Griffith is at the party for I think it was either at the party or it was leading up to the party where we see Griffith. He's in the castle and they're giving him the title of count, and we see the other royals basically snickering and politicking behind Griffith's back. Basically saying like, "Oh no, it's a mercenary. He has like X, Y, and Z. He's going to think like this, that, and the third." And we get a little bit of exposure of the world in terms of like conspiracy, as we got exposed to the magical conspiracy, and we also got exposed to the political conspiracy. And just thinking about that, like it's going back to the original point, like it seems like the rage is just going to be focused on the machinations of everybody trying to essentially control him by getting in order to get what they want. At least like that's what my thoughts are on moving forward. And uh, that's all the questions that I really have. And what we can do is we can go around the table, give some closing remarks. I really did enjoy this film, and in the sense of getting a little bit of exposure to the Berserk franchise. And as we've said before, the end of this film definitely does lead you on enough to where you want to watch the second film in the franchise. So what we can do, Jay, we can listen to you in regards to any other comments or remarks on the film that you would like to make.
All right. Yeah, again, I think it's a part of what really drives my Guts as a character is that he's emotionally damaged in a way that we, again, don't really see. But there is like a moment, again, when we come out of that 3-year time skip, he confronts Casa,
Costco,
whatever, about him being the distraction, when she brought up Sam about like he's not going to risk his man's lives, and he takes that a personal offense. It's like, after 3 years of working together, why can't you see that I'm a different person? And even when, again, before we get to the revealing of the eyes of the Egg of the King scene, he's training himself, cutting leaves with his giant great sword, and replaying that, yeah, I care about Griffin, and his life is in my hands sometimes, because, again, that's the role of the right hand of the king. And it does make me think of like other series that do this pretty well, like Game of Thrones. Again, is the obvious comparison, but it's also the idea that is being very sneakily underput into the story about how the nobility of knights is really flawed. And I think that's something important to think about here, because the world isn't as dark as I thought it was going to be off the bat. I thought it was going to be like dark fantasy, but it's pretty lighthearted. But there is like this very subtle undercurrent of, yes, this is medieval times where knights were treasured for their ability to be killers. And again, that kind of says something to Griffin's merits, is that he's the best killer out of everyone, which he is. Of course, he's the leader of a band of mercenaries. But the story never sides or never takes a side about what's good and what's bad. And I think that's really interesting to say that they are just doing a job, but there's really no morality attached to it until until the very end of the movie. He gets the assassination order from Griffith, kills the general, but also kills the general's like 7-8-year-old son. It really off-puts everything that goes into Guts' character, I guess, as a mercenary, because there was no rule established, like no women or children kind of said anywhere. But, soldiers, at least at some time, did have a code of conduct. Chivalry, again, is a code of conduct for knights. Not that Guts is a knight, but Griffith does hold court. He does have a title. So you think Guts would kind of be an extension of that, but it's not. He just kills this kid. He feels bad about it. But again, something that was missing from establishing Guts' character is that sympathetic part of him where he was tortured as a kid himself. And that's kind of something that is a downside to the series, or at least downside to the movie so far, is that we do hopscotch over something that was necessary to connect these two moments, because he kills a kid, and that's the only time we see him kill innocents, because there is a particular focus in the opening of the movie where they've raided the castle and there's like dead bodies, and they've crowded the women, and they pull a baby out from the rubble, and that's from Gus' points of view. So you know that he cares about people somewhere deep down. He cares about civilian lives somewhere. He only really responds to being attacked or being commanded to kill people. But he kills this kid, and it just feels like, oh, let's move on. And that's something to make his character unlikable, which again, we already have Griffith, which is getting to be the more unlikable character. But to say that there is a sliding scale for both of the characters is a true thing. But I actually don't know where Guts is at the moment in his characterization. Like, where is he scaling to or scaling down to? So to just wrap up my points is that I'm going to watch the rest of the movies. Probably going to visit the manga, because it's when, again, I've seen enough panels about, I know the world is densely supernatural when you expand it out far enough in its scope. And I've seen enough of the horror elements to like put my feelers out with those Joji Ito kind of comics of nightmarish horrors. And I guess I would say if we were doing Resurrect or Reburied, that we're not doing, we're going to revisit that after we visit all three movies, because it's a trilogy. But for right now, I'm going to keep it going. So yeah, it's pretty good. I enjoyed myself.
All right, that's good. That's good to hear. And Jarrod, I know your ears perked up when Jay had said that, like, so far it's been pretty light and not as dark as he had led to be. Do you have any words that you would like to say to him?
I'm glad that you knew that my ears perked up, because if you both have listened and learned anything about my anime taste, I like to see people struggle. Yeah, I would say that Jay, be very prepared. I want to say the second or third movie, when it hits the fan, I wish I could see your reaction. Like, I want you to record that. Like, I want to live stream your reaction on like Discord. I have to see this. And wait, have you seen a further ahead?
I don't. I think I have seen the other movies, but it's been some time. Like, I do know that there is a turn. I want to say it's in the second one. I don't remember much of the third one, but
Well,
I do know that there is a turn, and I'm looking forward to it too.
I cannot wait, Jay. I really want to see your face when this happens. Yeah, it's like watching like Charlotte, I think is the name of the anime. Where it's like it's really lighthearted. Everybody has like superpowers with like a really cringy after effect. Like, oh, I can run real fast, but I can't stop, so I had to wear
Yes.
body armor.
Yeah.
It's like, and then like it just turns real dark somehow, and it like you don't see it coming. But for this one, like I know, like you kind of feel it coming. You just don't feel it. Like you just don't understand how extreme it can be, and that it's like it goes from that's kind of like an undertone of the anime to this is the anime. You sign on, for this BDSM experience.
Okay, good to know, because the second movie came out in the fall of this year, so we have a couple of months to
Yes.
arrange a schedule. Maybe we can watch it together. You can revisit it, and we can watch it. You can see my live reaction. I'll put a camera on my face. But yeah, the second movie.
Ooh.
So the first one's called Egg of the King. The second one, I think the third one's called The Advent. I think.
The third one is the Advent.
Yeah, but I don't know the second one.
Let me see.
I'm gonna go look it up right now so I know which one I want to see your reaction
Okay,
for.
good. But overall, that does make sense. I'm glad that you spoke very, not candidly about it, but you kept it very,
Vague.
yeah, lips tight about it, because it's really hard to talk about the series, because it does feel so much similar to Attack on Titan. Again, I guess that would be a good parallel to make, because it was influenced by, some of the elements were influenced into Attack on Titan. Same thing with like Hellsing and Claymore. There's like, you can go down the list of people that have taken inspiration from this. But yeah, specifically with Attack on Titan, you can't really talk about Attack on Titan anymore when you know what's going on currently, and then talk about the first season of Attack on Titan, because it will really just blow your mind to be able to see the course of the events roll out for the first time. So thank you, Jarrod, for keeping it very tight to the vest, or close to the vest. And I guess the only last thing I would mention as we're closing up now is that it's odd that this is done by Studio OLM, because we've talked about them a little bit before. Oh, sorry, the original anime was done by OLM, who's doing Komi-san right now, which we watched a few episodes, as well as Odd Taxi, which got a anime nomination. So again, it's always talking about studios that just really surprise you with what the properties that they'll handle. And I just want to mention that because it is definitely ripe for another adaptation. Again, I don't think this is probably the best iteration. Probably the anime is a little bit more fleshed out, even though it's dated. Again, it came back in the early 90s or the late 90s.
It's the late 90s,
Yeah. So, like, Berserk has like 41 volumes, I think. And with the passing of the mangaka, it's in the firm camp of, we could probably do justice to this property without terribly infringing on what it is. Like, it feels like it has a heart and soul that's like so stone cold to what it needs to be that no one can misinterpret it, like what they did with the Netflix series of Cowboy Bebop. But anyways, yeah, I'm looking forward to, hopefully in the near future, like a Studio Mappa, or even another studio that does choreography well. That's not really even important. It's actually more of a subtle story than it is needing to be a shonen topic, even though it's like rated R. And you do get your one scene of nudity from, oh my god, her name, Casca. Yeah, for
just call her Costco, man.
For the R rating. So yeah, one scene of nudity, but other than that, and the violence, of course, horses' legs getting chopped off and limbs getting chopped off. But yeah, what was the movie's second name? The second name of the movie?
So the second movie, it is Golden Age Arc 2, The Battle for Doldre. And that would be the second film that we will be watching. And Jarrod, do you have any other thoughts or comments you would like to make?
I will just say the second movie is where it takes a slight turn, and the third is where it becomes all out Berserk.
Thank you again for joining us and talking with us about this franchise. As stated before, you were the one that helped put me onto this franchise, and I know that this has a special place in your heart. And with you knowing all that you know, it's just very good to get your opinions and get your perspective as we're sort of walking through this film franchise. Thanks again for joining us today to speak about Berserk with us.
Anytime.
And with that, like I said, that will wrap up our thoughts on Berserk, the Golden Age Arc 1, the Egg of the King. And be ready to join us for whenever part 2 comes out. Maybe we'll get to talk about like how everyone's reactions are when the turn in the second film takes place. And now, Jay, what do you have for us today?
Yeah, so I found a nursery rhyme that feels appropriate for what potentially might happen to Guts and Griffith in their story, but it goes: Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's mans couldn't put Humpty together again.